Hello and welcome to Niaga Spotlight with me, Tamina Kausji. Niaga Spotlight goes to the week in business and future affairs. Market watch analysis on so many industries. This is what we've got here on Niaga Spotlight every week. Well, this week we're actually going to be covering future affairs and looking at something which is a very interesting topic indeed, investing in your 40s. Now, it's really interesting to note that according to the EPF, Malaysians require at least around R1 million saved away by the time they're ready to retire. However, this is not true of most of the projections that we have been seeing of late. So, joining me to discuss this topic in depth is Joseph Cherian, Deputy CEO and Professor of Practice and Finance with the Asia School of Business. Joe, how are you today? Welcome to studios.
I'm fine, thank you.
Fantastic. So let's get the ball rolling, Joe. I really wanted to ask you, when individuals enter their 40s, financial priorities often shift. What are your thoughts about what we should be looking at as Malaysians, all things considered, in the first Q of 2024?
Okay, it's a good question because 40s is a critical stage in your life. But to me, investing and savings is a life cycle decision. It should take place throughout your lifetime. And the 40s may be a point at which you hit certain events. Some people get married, or they may have a kid, or they may buy a house, and so on. So that can be life-changing. So you need to review and see how your portfolio allocation is with respect to your remaining life cycle. So what I would say is that we need to always look at this investing and financial decision-making thing throughout your life cycle. And then so that means like every 2 to 3 years, review and see how are you reaching your life goals, are you reaching your career goals and so on, and how do you adjust your investment style based on that. But the events in your life are what dictate when you have to make major revisions.
Sure.
Whether you're a stockbroker or a newscaster, you have to have different asset allocation. It's not 40. It's your job, your career, your circumstances that define your life goals.
Absolutely. Now, I think it's really interesting that you have actually taken the approach of looking at it as a life cycle opportunity, not just something that begins when you're in your 40s, right? And I wanted to zone in on the fact that according to, once again, EPF statistics, about 45% of Malaysians will not even have 100,000 ringgit in savings upon retirement, which is far lesser than half of the 240,000 ringgit threshold that has been set by EPF. So perhaps we'll backtrack a little as we discuss what is it that is preventing, or what do you think are some of the factors impacting Malaysians having so little in savings according to the most recent trends and data?
Yeah, the statistics are even worse than you projected. In fact, one statistics I saw from the Ministry of Finance showed that more than 50% have less than 10,000 before hitting the age of 55. So which means they just don't have enough to save. The rich are okay, they have their savings. It's just the lower income and middle income that are suffering. Now, this is a pretty sad problem that we've ended up with, because EPF was one of the most respected retirement savings scheme in the world. We started very early on, we saved a lot, but the problem is, it's not the returns weren't good. The returns are excellent. As we know, the EPF manages our money very well and gives us a very good return. It's because we have this temptation to dig into our pot, and that causes problems for different purposes, whether it's for housing or exigencies or a pandemic. We had multiple layers of digging into your pot. That really affects your long-term returns. In order for you to accumulate R1 million or even the 240,000 ringgit threshold, you need to keep the money intact and let it have a long runway to grow. You can't be digging into your pot. But this is a temptation many countries face. It's not just Malaysia. So it's a role of government to ensure that people don't have this temptation to dig into the pot. Now, your corollary to that would be, how about exigencies? Well, in most countries, when there's an exigency like a pandemic or flood, you don't ask people to dig into their savings for retirement. The government provides the right transfers to help people who need the help most. So it's the role of government
Absolutely.
to provide.
And I think, of course, I'm sitting here now in Q2 of 2024. In retrospect, those were definitely some unsound decisions that were made. But of course, we had transitions of several different governments during that time in Malaysia. But now going back to the median population age of Malaysia, Joe, which is about 30.8 years. So would you say that actually might be the right time for young Malaysians to start thinking about strategies and even considering, I need to start saving, rather than also giving in to the temptation of credit cards and so many other things which have come up over the past 3 to 5 years?
Right. So, Tevena, good point you raise. It's never too late to start saving. You should have started earlier on. That means
Fair.
at the point you enter into the workforce, you should have started saving for retirement.
So mid-20s then.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But even at 40, it's not too late. All you need is a long enough runway, which means you should not be dying to retire at the age of 55. In most Western countries, the retirement age is close to 70.
Correct. We're
Here-
still locked in at 60.
60, I know,
Yes.
but the thing is everyone's thinking about retirement at the age of 55, right?
Fair.
So I don't know what's it about Asians. In America, where I lived most of my life, people love to work a lifetime, but over here everyone's thinking of retiring. So if you have a shortage of savings, you need to lengthen your runway for savings, which means working longer. I know it's an unpopular thing to say, but think about extending your working lifespan to the age of 65 or 68 or whatever. 60 is just a benchmark, but there's no reason why you can't go on to 65 or 68.
Fair enough. And because you picked up on the fact that you did spend a lot of your working life as a professional overseas, what are the differences that you've observed between perhaps Western and Eastern or Asian approaches to financial investments, particularly when people are coming on this critical decade of their lives, their 40s?
Okay, so first of all, let me clarify, I am Malaysian, so I'm an Easterner at heart. But
Sure.
unfortunately, I spent very large span of my lifetime in the West, and only in one country, the USA. So what I observe is they're bigger risk takers. They care more about themselves, very individualistic, which means they care about their retirement, not so much their kids or their relatives' retirement or society's
Right.
retirement.
Fair.
They are willing, as I think I said it, they're willing to take risks, which means try new opportunities after they retire. Try on a new job. I mean, whether it's becoming an artist or whether it's doing work at a university.
Doing a passion project.
Some passion project. You know, they're always looking at other sources of keeping busy and maybe earning some income from it. So that's the US style. They're willing to reverse mortgage their home.
Fair
To
enough.
reverse mortgage your home, you need to also kick out your kids out of the house. They have no problems kicking their kids out of their house. Here in Asia, and this is not just unique to Malaysia, I've seen this
Sure.
in Hong Kong, Singapore, Malaysia, so I'm not picking on any country. We are so concerned about what relatives would say if we fail, so don't take so much risk, right? Secondly, we are worried about retiring at the age of 55, or 60. That has to go away. We need to work longer, especially if you're healthy, because idle mind is a sad thing to waste. You know what I'm saying? You need to be occupied because people are living longer, and you have to live up with that. So, work longer because you're living longer, right? And you're healthy as well, take care of your health and stuff like that. The other thing is we are too much, I think it's very good that we care about family and society and we have the filial
And we'll be
piety.
digging a lot deeper into that in a bit about all the responsibilities that come with
It
that.
can also be an albatross on your shoulder in the sense that you will not be making optimal decisions in your own interest and then end up being a burden to society because you've made some bad decisions because of being an Easterner. You see what I'm
Exactly.
saying?
I'll pick
Yeah.
up on that thread a little
Okay.
later, particularly regarding the fact that Malaysia also has a very high incidence of NCDs, non-communicable diseases, and roughly 1 in every 2 adults actually has an NCD. That also adds a different layer of requiring assisted care, medical expenses, etc., which generally is clocking in at about roughly a decade towards end of life. But back to a different topic now first, Joe. So let's look at fluctuations in the value of the ringgit. And of course, the ringgit has not been doing too well of late, but how is that impacting investment strategies, and ought it to affect investment strategies, or should people still continue looking at opportunities?
Okay, fortunately, I'm a US dollar investor, and I know your audience will not care for that. So the ringgit has worked in my favor, but that's the problem. It doesn't work in the favor of Malaysians who are invested in ringgit. So the ringgit has depreciated quite a bit, which is good for the economy as well, because it has this mercantile effect, which basically means we can export more and our economy can have healthier GDP growth numbers, because we're exporting more, right? Because our ringgit is cheaper, and that brings in a lot of foreign exchange. But the general feeling of well-being reduces. When you travel to Japan, Japan is a bad example because they are also in as bad shape as us, the yen that is. Australia or UK or America, where our ringgit has depreciated so much, you feel very poor. So the general sense of well-being goes down. So it's not good, right? But at the same time, the benefits to it, as I said, if you're in the export sector, you work in the export sector, good for you. You're going to do very well. That's why you can see a lot of investments coming in through the chip sector, semiconductors.
Very much so,
you know,
billions.
Our government is bringing billions in because they find this is a great place to invest, good return on their money, right? So what you need to do to fight this is to hedge currency risk. But 99% of your audience don't know how to hedge currency risk, I assume. So what you need to do is talk to your banker and open up foreign currency accounts. If it's allowed, I think it's allowed in Malaysia, that you can have multiple currency accounts and maybe save in different currencies for the diversification factor. And maybe we can talk about diversification as well along the way. So you need to also diversify your currencies. And Malaysia, if I'm not mistaken, the banks do allow you to open up accounts in different currencies. So if you have a diversified set of developed countries, whether you know the benchmark currencies like sterling pounds, US dollar, Australian dollar, it gives you some amount of hedging, natural hedging, as opposed to try and put on a hedge through a futures market or something.
Yeah, fair enough. And that's one way of looking at investing in the lower for longer ringgit, right?
Correct.
And also at the OPR environment. One last area, if you could touch on this for a while, Joe. Now, retirement planning also becomes increasingly important in your 40s. And what do you feel are some main key areas that individuals need to be focusing on, specifically concerning, as we've already briefly discussed, the fact that especially as Asians, we tend to be looking at familial well-being or other responsibilities and not necessarily focusing on, you know, number one.
Yeah. So nothing wrong with looking after your family. I look after my family too. So there's nothing wrong with that, nothing wrong with filial piety, but I'm just saying you want to be sure that you take care of yourself first, because you don't want to be a burden to others and society. So you need to save up as much as you can for retirement. That's the first thing. And you also need to ensure that you're willing to monetize assets at your disposal to supplement your retirement income. And there are ways to do that. You know, your home, if you have enough equity in the home, let's say you have 100% equity in the home, you can actually install a reverse mortgage with Chagamas and get retirement income there from that source in your retirement. You know, I can talk about that if your viewers are interested, how you can supplement your income through monetization programs. The problem is we want to bequeath this home to our progenitors or bloodline,
Fair
right?
enough, yes.
And because of that, we will be willing to sacrifice a home for a future generation as opposed to taking care of ourselves by monetizing the value of our house. I found this problem quite puzzling when I first came back. It's not a Malaysian problem, it's a Singapore problem, it's a generic Asian problem.
Regional issue and approach,
because
perhaps.
we want to save that house for our children, grandchildren, but I'm asset rich and cash poor.
Yes.
How about
Very
converting that assets to cash, monetize it? It's very common in the West to do this. It's common practice. But here I find people a bit more reticent. They'd rather be hard up and live a tough life and sacrifice than try to get more comfortable in retirement by monetizing their home. And as I mentioned, Chagamas actually offers a reverse mortgage program now.
Very interesting. Thanks so much for sharing that, Joe. So we'll pause there for a little bit. We'll be right back after a quick break. Stay with us right here on Niaga Spotlight. Welcome back to Niaga Spotlight, still with me, Tamina Kazji, and today, of course, we've been discussing investing in your 40s. Prof, So let's move on into looking at the importance of diversifying assets, because this is also often recommended as another strategy which especially those in their 40s can jump upon.
Yeah, I think a general problem I've found when I talk to my friends and family and relatives since coming back is everyone thinks they are stock experts. They want to buy counters based on rumors, friends calling up, or what they read in the papers. I think we should try to avoid the temptation. When you save away for retirement or for future needs, you need to be as diversified as possible. And what I advise my friends and relatives is buy low cost, highly diversified funds, and you can do that. You can go to all the different, I'm not going to promote any funds here since I'm not paid by them, but what I'm saying is that just call up the banks and find out what do they charge on the fees. You have a right to ask, what's your management fee, what's your sales load. There should be zero sales load, and the management fee should be as low as possible.
And a right to that kind of professional advice rather than taking it all in your hands.
Correct. You should go to an advisor who has got fiduciary responsibility to look out for your interest. That's very important. Not a broker, because they're paid on commissions. That's their job. You can't blame them. So they'll sell you the highest fee product because that benefits them, right? But they may not benefit the client. But a financial advisor with fiduciary responsibility, usually it's regulated, they are regulated, they have an interest to look out for the client. So they will probably recommend the best funds, as they are agnostic, they're not paid on fees or brokerage, but they're paid on advice, okay? So I would recommend go for diversified funds, do not buy individual counters, but if you have anything over and above that's surplus money that you can play with, sure, go and do the punting or whatever you want to do. But there should be a baseline amount put into diversified funds. It works for me. It worked for me over the years. And I'm used to be in the banking industry. I mean, I used to be in investments and I'm considered an expert in investing. But when it came to my personal investing, I just socked it away into diversified low-cost funds. Over the years, it's done very well for me. It doesn't protect you from market downturns.
Fair enough.
But it will definitely mitigate the amount of loss your portfolio suffers.
Especially if you're chasing after those high net worth and high value ones.
Correct. Correct. Yeah.
All right. Point well taken. Joe, moving along from there into looking at debt management, which also becomes a more crucial aspect of financial planning as, of course, responsibilities do pile on as we age. So what should be some of the priority areas in this arena, debt management?
Okay, so everything should be looked at holistically at the portfolio level. It's not just investments, but it's also debt management. So institutions, especially the sophisticated financial institutions, hedge funds, pension funds, look at it at what's called asset liability management. So they don't just talk about asset management, it's asset liability. That means also make sure what debts you have, what interest payments you're making, and so on, and then make that holistic portfolio decision. Somehow when it trickles down to the individual level, we forget about asset liability management. We keep them as separate things. Investments is one thing, debt is another thing.
Right.
And that's where you do not do the trade-offs. So you may end up borrowing on your credit card at 28% per annum, which makes no sense to me, and then earning only 3% return on the portfolio side, right? What you should do is, first of all, pay off that 28% negative cash flow.
Fair.
Before you try to earn a meager 3%. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
It's a trade-off,
you're
right?
chasing after, those single digits, but you're piling on 28 every single
correct.
year. Yeah.
So that doesn't make sense. So that's where, to your point, we need to look at both sides of the equation. How do we end up in debt? And Malaysians have a lot of debt.
Yes,
Car
we do.
loans, house loans, buying things you cannot afford, or what
BNPL, which is the latest, buy now, pay later trend.
That's a global trend, right?
Absolutely.
It's not just Malaysia. It's very deceptive, these things, because you do not incur pain now, and then the pain comes later, and then you find out it's accumulated and you can't afford to pay it. So there are many ways to get indebted heavily. It's very bad. I mean, I personally try to tell people, while debt is good as part of the, you get sometimes tax offsets from it, it helps you do things you would not have been able to pursue without the borrowing element.
Fair.
But still, be careful, don't be overwhelmed, do it prudently, take on debt carefully, and make sure you look at it as a portfolio context. That means consider all the debt and payouts you're making on the liability side, along with the investments. Look at it holistically. And that's where a financial advisor can help you. As you put all the cards on the table, looking at the assets and the liabilities.
Especially considering that we've got so many options now, and perhaps it's easier and quicker to get that financial advice.
Yep. And I add one more thing, Tamina. My parents actually always brought me up saying, live within your means. It's never more accurate. It's a phenomenon everywhere.
I think we're slowly coming back to that rationale, though, you know, after
I think
having
we have to live within our
extravagance.
means. And secondly, you also don't want to buy the house that you can't afford, right? You buy one that's affordable, so don't take on too much of a mortgage just because you want to get that mansion or whatever. So I think the living within your means is very important advice in these days.
Very prudent indeed. And because you were just mentioning housing and buying houses, let's look at now a different aspect of expanding one's portfolio, real estate. So it can also play a significant part in a diversified portfolio. And what considerations should individuals in their 40s look at, specifically when they're looking at it as an investment?
Okay, first of all, make sure you have a roof over your head. So real estate from that context is very useful.
Fair.
Because you save on the imputed rental income. Instead of paying rental income, you have a roof over your head and an asset that usually, not always, appreciates in value, right, over time. It's not necessary, but the fact is, generally speaking, these assets inflate over time. Now, that said, real estate is a good diversifier, and it should be considered as part of your portfolio. So if you put 10% or 20% of your wealth aside for real estate, that's the amount of real estate exposure in your total portfolio. That should be taken into account. You can't put it into a different pocket. That's part of the overall portfolio. So let me give you an example. If I have a house, I own a house, and I have the rest of my assets invested in equities and fixed income, I would think twice about taking money out of the equities or fixed income portion and putting into REITs. I don't know if you all have REITs here, but these are real estate investment trusts.
Correct.
Real estate investment trusts are pooled vehicles that are investing in real estate. So now I own a house that's worth about, say, 20% of my portfolio, and then I go buy another 10% of REITs. Now I have 30% of my assets in real estate. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
It basically, you have to take that into consideration. Do you really want to have 30% exposure to real estate? So I am a believer in real estate, and as a diversifier, but just do it prudently. Don't overlook the double counting of real estate assets, because some of the assets you count as you buy may be also real estate property developers, right? So they're also highly correlated to the real estate market. So you may have a lot of unintended exposure to real estate. Now, of course, if you want to be a landlord in Klang Valley, you want to go buy all the abandoned homes in Bangsa and different areas, go ahead and do that. That's your passion. That's okay. But go into it with your eyes wide open.
Fair enough. And I like the fact that you re-emphasized on the availability of REITs, because I don't think too many people, especially those who are younger, are looking at that as even an option when they are considering real estate. Perhaps we could end on one very important aspect of, not just saving, but also investment that comes up in most lifespans: education funding for children. Now, this, of course, is a concern for so many parents, and according to most recent estimates, raising a child in Malaysia costs anywhere between 400,000 ringgit to R1 million, all the way from the birth of the child to, in particular, university fees, where the bulk of the expenses are. How can young parents or young people better plan financially for the education needs that will probably be coming up in a decade or even two or so?
Okay, can I kill two birds with one stone?
Absolutely.
Yeah, education and healthcare. So in America and in many other countries, including Singapore, you have different tax advantage savings buckets for education, for future, and healthcare. So we need to do both. So I'll talk about education, but think also that it can also apply in the case of healthcare.
Fair enough.
Setting up tax advantage accounts to pay for your medical expenses in retirement or the insurance required in retirement, right? So on the education part, again, the US has got what's called 529 plans. It's an education savings plan that's fully tax advantage. And if you take it out to pay for your kids' education, you don't pay any taxes on it. So it actually can grow at a very good rate, just like an EPF or whatever, at a high rate if you invest it in markets and other good investments. And then it can be used for payment for education. So we need to think of setting that up in Malaysia, the government through the EPF or whatever, an education sleeve that people can save specifically over and above the retirement sleeve
Sure.
for education, right? That means it's tax advantage. So you're going to increase the amount of tax benefits you're going to give to the individual. Now that said, education is a bit of a scam. Sorry, I'm a professor, but I'm just telling you, it's getting very unaffordable.
It is getting, exactly.
Yeah, and
particularly private universities, which are increasingly an option and more attractive to parents, and they're even considering it all the way from primary, secondary school.
Absolutely. I think Malaysia, I've seen more of America, where the cost of education has just gone through the roof.
Spiraling, yes.
So it's, in my view, I always believe in democratization, whether it's buying assets off the stock market or alternative investments, or whether getting an education. You need to democratize the process. We need to bring the cost of education down so more people can get educated. In fact, MIT, our sister organization, who are we in collaboration with, had a program where Syrian refugees in Jordan could learn from MIT through the online platform.
Right.
And some of them went on to get their, what they call micromasters at MIT. I mean, think about it. These people would have been neglected if they were not given this opportunity by MIT to get the education. I went to MIT. I went there physically to bricks and mortar to get my glorified degree in engineering. You know what I'm saying? Now you have a Syrian refugee in Jordan having that same opportunity. What if we could do this more widely to everyone? Not just to Syrians in Jordan, but to the villager in Sarawak or Sabah or in Kelantan, you know. All of them have equal opportunity to the best education. We need to have a mix of technology, make it more affordable, scale it up, and there won't be any privilege anymore, in the sense that the privilege seems to get more benefits towards education. They can afford the tuition, and then they say it's meritocracy. You know, it's meritocracy. I mean, come on. You have privilege, so you get meritocracy because you could go for tuition and all the other aid. I want every villager in every town in Malaysia to have that same opportunity, and you have to use technology. And we are pioneering some of that at ASB. We're trying to bring that. You know, we came from all the top schools, and we feel it's time to get that knowledge down to the district level, to the village level. Let's start in Malaysia, then we can go to other parts of the world. So we hope to do that through our programs as well. We're using technology, remote learning, with in-person experience. You can't remove the in-person experience. That means that Syrian refugee in Jordan has to at some point go to MIT or ASB or whatever, the school I'm at. But most of it is delivered through online means, and because that's a lot cheaper with technology.
Exactly. And I think what you're really speaking over here alludes to the fact that, you know, we need to ensure that there's access, and that barriers to access in particular are broken down, because ultimately when we're speaking about investing in your 40s or at any age really, this is only really going to apply to a fairly small proportion of the Malaysian working population. Joe, I could honestly go on for a lot more, but thank you so much for your time and insights. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Same here. Thank you.
Well, that's all we have time for today on Niaga Spotlight. I'm Tamina Kausji signing off for now. We'll see you next Friday with more business analysis and insights. Here's to a productive week ahead.